got Jono, I got Manas, I got me, Chuck, Sabin, Nima at home, and Tessa, who's making sure that we still have audio outside, who's now joining us, giving us a thumbs up. Kicking off this day, we've already stole 7 minutes of his time, is going to be Manas, who's going to go through the recap that we did at Build, talking about the community plan, which I'm very, very excited about. Me as a developer can go out and write PowerApps and not have to worry about licensing for that. And then from there, we've got Tessa, who is just waving, saying we got good audio. And then from there, it's Nima or Jono? Sabin, who's
It'll be Nima.
It'll be Nima after that. So Manas, and what did you guys announce at Build?
Thanks, Chuck, for this webinar, and thanks all of you for attending in this webinar. So excited to present and talk about PowerApps Community Plan. We launched PowerApps Community Plan at the Build conference, which was May 10th. And I'm Manas Maheshwari, a program manager with PowerApps. So I just want to make sure that everyone is able to see the screen. Nima, are you able to see the screen? Awesome, great. Okay, so what's this new plan? What is PowerApps Community Plan and why should you use it? So PowerApps Community Plan is for the folks who want to learn and build skills for PowerApps, Microsoft Flow, and common data services. It offers a full featured environment for an individual use. So this is an important factor. It's an individual use, and we'll talk more about it in detail in the next slides. You can build on common data services, customize it, create your own custom entities, etc., and use SDK as well. You can as well create apps and publish on App Source for the test drive. So the difference between this plan and the rest of the plan, and specifically since it offers the full functionality environment, is that this is only not for the production use. It's only for the individual use and for learning and building skills. Now, how do you sign up for the PowerApps Community Plan? There are 2 ways you can sign up for PowerApps Community Plan. One is we have a nice marketing site, which is PowerApps Community Plan page, which you're seeing on the right-hand side. We'll also see it in the detail during the demo. And there are various entry points from PowerApps marketing site pointing to this page, where you can just say, get started free if you are a new user to PowerApps. If you're already using PowerApps before, you can just click on environment for yourself and begin from there. So it's just one click, and we'll go through this process. PowerApps Community Plan is also included with Visual Studio Community. So if you're a Visual Studio Community user, just visit your My Benefits page, and you'll find a PowerApps style. Get started from there. So before jumping on to the details about PowerApps Community Plan and what all does it have and what all does it offer, I just want to do a recap on overall PowerApps plans. So with Visual Studio and the latest with the Build conference, what we launched was PowerApps Community Plan, and which is also included with Dev Essentials or Community. With Visual Studio Pro and Enterprise, we have already made update in our blogs that we are going to launch in soon, and PowerApps is going to be part of Pro and Enterprise My Benefits as well. We are still going to announce, so the announcement is still there, going to happen, that what exact plans of PowerApps will be included as part of them. So if you see the overall PowerApps plans today, what's available after when we went GA October 2016 was inclusion with Office 365 and Dynamics 365 plans. We also offer PowerApps Plan 1 and Plan 2, which are standalone plans, and offer 90-day free trial with Plan 2. With Build Conference, what we announced was PowerApps Community Plan and inclusion with Visual Studio Community. Next, and we have already made these announcements in various blog posts, is inclusion with PowerApps with Visual Studio Pro and Enterprise, and PowerApps with Office 365 Enterprise K1, which is the kiosk plan from Office 365. Okay, now let's talk about what is this new concept of free individual environment. What is this individual environment about? So an individual environment is just like any other environment which you create today, with some differences. So you can create unlimited apps with it, unlimited flows, with the caveat of 750 flow runs per month. But you cannot share these apps and flows with any other user in your company, which is different from the standard way the environment works. The rest of the environment works. You can model your data on common data services, create custom entities, use the standard entities, and for that you have 200 MB of database and 2 GB of file storage. Just a caveat on that you cannot apply any add-ons on top of it to increase the size of the database. It's fixed at 200 MB. You can connect to standard or premium connectors, whether it's a SharePoint or Dynamics 365 or Salesforce or Twitter. You can connect to any of the connectors offered with PowerApps or Flow, and also create unlimited custom APIs and use them. Interesting point is you can as well connect your on-premises data with the help of gateway. So, and you can administer this environment and set data policies for it. So just how you manage rest of your environments, you will be able to do this from the admin center and manage the environment. You'll not be able to add any users to this environment because it's an individual environment for you. So before we jump on to the demo, are there any questions which we need to answer?
No, there aren't any questions. Drummer Dude says he has problems with audio, and Audrey says you're doing a great job.
Okay, thank you. So audio part, if we need to figure out something. Okay, so let's get on to PowerApps community plan website. So here is PowerApps community plan website, and it talks about all the functionalities offered with PowerApps community plan. And what we have, since we are already an existing user of PowerApps, and I would assume most of the people who are attending this webinar would also be existing users of PowerApps, Flow, or Common Data Services, you might just click on this one and get started. Otherwise, if you're new, you can, if you haven't used Office 365 before, or it doesn't have an account with Azure Active Directory, you can start with Get Started Free as well. So let me click on Create an Individual Environment for myself. I'll create an individual environment for Manas. Sign up page where it talks about, hey, just choose your country and begin. So my country is United States. I'll just let that be. It's defaulted for me, and click on Accept. So the moment I click on Accept, I'll be landing into the web.powerapps.com with an individual environment created for me. So if you observe, my name of this user was user2, and we have an environment created, which is an individual environment for user2's environment. It's named as user2's environment. It's an individual environment. There's also a banner highlighting that right on the top, which says this is an individual environment and not meant for production use. And clicking on this Learn More link, you'll be taken to some of the community pages, community plan document, where you can learn more about what the community plan is and what all does it offer. Interesting thing is that we are going to create a database with it, because let's explore this PowerApps community plan in the individual environment.
So George Carlisle was asking, how many databases can you create with the new community plan?
Only one.
Only one.
Yeah. So even today, you can create for any environment one database, and this of just another environment which is of type individual, and you can create one database with it.
Perfect. Thank you, Manas.
Okay. So we are going to create a database. And while it's creating the database for us, time, and it has created, looks like. Yeah, okay. So you can create, and what we're going to do next is create an app on this Common Data Services and go through the end-to-end flow and try sharing it, and then observe what happens on that. Time to create database. So while it's doing that, let's go to the create.powerapps.com and try creating a few apps with it, this individual environment. Okay. Okay, so the database is created. And now what we're going to do is right from here, we'll go to so this is a web authoring tool which we have. So if I'm sure most of you will be aware of, you can create apps with the help of our PowerApps Studio, which is there on the Windows, or you can also use the web portal, which is create.powerapps.com, and you can create all the apps which you need. Okay, awesome. So we have this. I'm logged in as user2, and it's user2's environment, which is my environment for my individual use. And what we're going to do is create a new app. So while it's loading, it's going to load all the app from templates and app from data. And what we're going to do is create from Common Data Services, CDS. And what we're going to do is choose an entity, and on top of it, we are going to create an app. Okay. If you want, you can also create any other connection, and I'm just going to repeat that. You can create a connection with any standard connector, premium connector, etc. For now, we are going to use CDS, Common Data Services, for it. Okay. chosen account, which from the sales, and then it's building an app right from scratch for me. So while it's building an app, what we're going to do is go to the apps in the web.powerapps.com and go to the apps I own. And there are no apps right now for me. And now when we create this app, we're going to save this app and see that in web.powerapps.com if we can share that app. Okay, it's taking a little bit more than the usual. It's because
we've been walking through this. John has been answering questions in the chat window. We'll make sure that he puts those in the audio track as well for people that watch the video after the fact, as far as the number of file size, the number of megabytes as well.
Awesome. So we have the app created with us, and what we're going to do is we are going to save it. Okay. Let's say demo app, and it's saving to PowerApps. Okay. So while it's saving to PowerApps, okay, it has saved. Great. And we're going to just refresh this one. Oh, here you go. We see the app which we just created with Common Data Services. It's demo app. And what we're going to do is go to the share screen. Rest all the stuff, which is like you can view the details, which is exactly same as functionality offer, environments offer. You can see the versions, you can see the settings. In the share, the only thing is if you try sharing it with any other user in the organization, it will just block the sharing part of it. So while there is some changes in this experience happening, but you cannot share this app with any other user in the environment or organization. Similarly, you can create flows, connections, and gateways. This was about overall the PowerApps community plan to begin with. And I also wanted to mention that if you're a Visual Studio community user, then you can go to the My Benefits page and try it out. And you can as well visit the admin center from the gear over here. And so let's do that to manage these environments. Yeah, if you visit over there, you can just click on it and like you see the environment here. This is the user 2's environment. It's created in the Europe region. And if you try adding any other user to admin and maker, you'll be blocked. But you can do rest of the functionalities, view the resources of it, view the database details, etc. associated with it. Yeah. That was pretty much about PowerApps community plan. More than happy to answer any questions if there are any.
It looks like George has got a couple and John has been answering those. But just to recap, this is actually to remove the friction and the financial burden for an individual to get started. So therefore, where the limits are really set for a person getting started and lots of tiers for people to go out and go all the way up to the enterprise. Is that about right?
Right. So if you want to use the apps and flows in the production use, then definitely there are plans to offer it. Plan 1, Plan 2 with Office 365, Dynamics 365, there are plenty of plans.
That is awesome. Thank you very much. We've got Tessa next, who's flying her Canadian colors in her little picture. I like that. And we're going to have Manas turn off of his microphone.
Yeah.
And actually, we're going to have Manas turn off Sabin's microphone, the way it worked out today. Because they can't hear us now, probably.
I just turned mine on.
Okay. And what we'd like George or the drummer dude or Hans is to go out and give us an act that you can hear me probably poorly. And Tessa, why don't you say something in your dulcet tones?
Yeah, can it? If anyone can confirm hearing us, that would be great. And I will start sharing my screen. You seen anything yet?
George says he can hear you. Yeah, thank you, George.
Awesome. Thank you so much for confirming, and I'll hop right into it. So as Chuck said, I'm Tessa, and I'm going to talk a little bit about building a connector for Flow and PowerApps. And we're going to hop right into it. This is also in addition to some of the announcements we made at Build. And we're really excited about all of the capabilities that are coming up. So one of the first questions we usually get is, what is a connector? So a connector is a wrapper around an existing web API that allows that service to communicate with Flow and PowerApps. So you might have seen many of the different connectors that we support today. We have about 130, and we're growing every single day, which we're really excited about. So just really where this connector shows up, I said it's both in Flow and PowerApps. So in Flow, there's a set of actions and triggers that a connector can be used to actually build out that custom workflow. And I know someone already on the chat mentioned not being familiar with PowerApps. So really quickly, Flow is about building workflow automations for non-developers, so all based in a UI. The connector also shows up in PowerApps, and PowerApps being about lightweight business applications. Again, with no code, you can bind any of the objects within your PowerApps app to an action within the connector. So for example, a button can actually go and create a task, or you can use a gallery to list out a set of items within a service. So I'll show a little bit more about the connectors actually, and we'll build one today so you get a feel for what it can do. So in general, when we talk about building connectors, we are talking to folks that own services and want to make this available to users. So one of the questions we get a lot is, why build a connector? Now, as I mentioned, we have over 130 data source connectors today. This wall is just some of the connectors that we have. It looks like there might be a little bit of a lag on the video, but you'll see it, there we go, show up with this, all of the different icons from some of the services that we support. So why would you build a connector and have your service show up in this list of different sources that we support? The easiest one is that it allows you to expand the number of systems that you integrate with. So instead of having to build in custom and native integrations between your service and say Outlook or Gmail or your service and other email providers or bug tracking or task management, you can actually leverage our platform of connectors to build those integrations. So just by building this integration one time, you get access to all of these different services that we provide. Similarly, as our ecosystem grows and expands, you're part of that extensible platform. So every connector that's added to our list of services increases those number of services, again, that you integrate with. So it's not a one-time set of access just to the current state. As that grows and evolves, you have access to the full platform. And then again, our products that we're talking about, Flow and PowerApps, are available to millions of users through Office 365 and Dynamics 365. And so having your service as part of our connectors and being part of that platform exposes their capabilities to those millions of users that we have. So now about building a connector, our focus has been to make it very lightweight to join our platform. You can very easily get started, and I'll show you how easy it is to build a connector with just one operation today. And then you can expand on it and grow based off of the needs and requests of your customers. So building a connector has kind of 4 stages. The very first thing we ask is that you check the requirements of our system to make sure that your service and the connector you're building makes sense with the products that we offer. Then you can develop using Flow and PowerApps through a feature we call Custom Connector, which I'll show today. So you can actually build and develop directly within the products that you'll release in. Then, of course, you can test and validate it. You can share within, give your users access to kind of an early version to ensure that the connector makes sense for what your users are looking for. And then finally, you can submit the artifacts for publishing within our system. And we do a set of validations before making it publicly available. So that's really it, those 4 steps, and you can get started building a connector. So just a little bit more details specifically on the requirements. As I mentioned, a connector is a wrapper around a web API that's already accessible. So we do require it to be accessible through the public web. Our services do support on-prem scenarios, but our extensibility platform does not today. We're working on expanding that in the future. The big one is that your service needs to target or support business user scenarios. So both PowerApps and Flow are focused on business users. So we want to ensure that the service that you're bringing, the connector that you're bringing to our platform makes sense for those users. And then we have a set of authentication types that we support today. And if you don't meet any of these requirements still, you're welcome to reach out through our nomination system, and we can talk a little bit more about options to integrate into our platform. And as I mentioned, once you've developed it and tested it, you submit it to us for certification. So this link can provide a little bit more information. If you go to aka.ms/API connectors, that'll give you more as you go. Okay, so with that, I'm going to jump into actually building a connector to really show you how quick and easy it is. At that point, I'll do a quick pause and see if anyone has any questions.
Things are going very good.
Okay, great. So I'll hop right into it. So this first screen that hopefully everyone can see is the PowerApps blog. As I mentioned, we announced this last week at Build, and so I'll share these links later, but if you go onto the PowerApps blog, you can get more information, as I just talked about what a connector can do, why you should build it, and then ultimately how you can build and submit the connector. All of this blog post actually links out to more information in our help documentation as well. Another place that might be interesting is actually from the Azure site itself. So azure.microsoft.com. Under Why Azure, there's a new section called Azure for SaaS Apps. And this site, again, went live at Build and talks a little bit more about how you can integrate into our system and get access to all of those hundreds of million users that I mentioned. So again, on the Azure site, scrolling down can give you more information about how to actually build these connectors, among other things that you can do to add to our platform. So with that, I will hop into actually building a connector. So as I mentioned, the capabilities are within Flow and PowerApps today under what we call a custom connector. So I think Manish showed this really quickly. In the top right-hand side, there's a gear. Same place that you would go to your admin center, we have an entry that we call custom connectors. Now, this was previously called custom APIs, and it's the same capabilities within the products. So we've been doing a ton of work recently to make this a lot easier to build a custom connector. So when I select new custom connector, it brings me into this editing experience. And I have a couple ways to get started. So all of our connectors are built off of OpenAPI or Swagger definitions. So if you already have one of those endpoint files, you can actually either choose to upload it or provide the URL where someone can connect. Another option that we have is leveraging Postman Collection, which is a popular dev tool, and that's actually what I'm going to show you today. So from a Postman Collection, you can interact and build web calls to an existing API or service that you have access to, and you can use that definition to build your connector. And it's worth noting that I'm talking about building a custom connector specifically for the purpose of submitting it for certification and so that it eventually ends up as part of our public connectors. But you can also do this for your own use within PowerApps and Flow to expand the capabilities and the services that it connects to. Flipping over to Postman really quickly, it's the free download that you can download easily to get started in making web requests. You'll also need access to, say, API documentation that tells you a little bit more about the API that you want to connect to. In this case, I'm going to use GitHub, and it's really easy to follow along and build out something similar to this. I also have a session, we had a session at Build that has this in real time as well, building out a demo. So I would definitely suggest taking a look and learning more. So I'm just going to do a quick web call that is going against a GitHub repository with a bug tracking system, and it's going to list out all of the issues in this particular repository. So I hit send and it actually goes out and makes that call and it shows me the response that comes back. I can start doing things like building out actual parameters. And this is interesting when you're making more custom operations. And I'll show you how this shows up in Flow in just a little bit. So instead of it being hard-coded, for example, to the endpoint that I want to hit, I'm going to make this as a user-provided value. Again, when I hit send, you can see I have that same response. I've already chosen the authentication types that's coming in. And with that, I really have an operation that I want to use now within the PowerApps that I'm building instead of, in this web client. So I'm going to just quickly hit save. And this request that I've built translates into an operation that's going to list out issues. So for example, I would call it list issues and then give it a quick description. And it's important when I'm building this out to provide nice naming, and I'll show you why. Connector in Flow or PowerApps, these output values are ultimately what I use to show in my PowerApps gallery or bind it to a button. So these are interesting information as well. So now, really quickly, I've built a what they call a GitHub collection, which is just a set of requests. And this is really going to represent that connector that I want to build. I will export it quickly and then flip back over to PowerApps. So now I can upload that collection, bring it back here to my demo folder. And you can see here, it actually went and imported the collection that I had, generated the definition, the Swagger definition that we require. And you can see it started to pull out some of the information that I added into that Postman collection. I can give it my own icon, my own name. So for example, it's 1034. We'll just add that information in there and go and hit create connector. So at this point, it actually is taking that collection that I generated and it's uploading it and saving it within my particular environment so that I can use it in any of my flows or PowerApps. So the same custom connector that I build actually will work across both products as well. So once I've saved it, or as I am building this, I can flip over to the authentication type. We support a variety of authentic types, including a generic OAuth option if the service you're looking to connect to supports OAuth. In this case, I'll use GitHub really quickly. Information. Now, again, if you're not a developer, but you do have a service that you're looking to connect to, all of the documentation explains how this, the different pieces of the security and the definition and everything works towards a connector. I'm rushing through some of those details just to show you ultimately the product that you'll get by building this connector. So again, the definition is mapping to the call that I made within Postman, and this is ultimately the operation that I want to show in PowerApps. I also have the ability to test my connector, so I can, in this dev view, I can actually make web requests and receive the responses so that I can further troubleshoot and build out that connector before it's ready to send it back to my customers to try it out. So with that, I'll actually go right into building a Power App. So I am going to say create a new app. And while this is loading, I'm going to go back and I'm going to just create a connection so that I can use that within my app. So in this case, it's my custom connectors, but if I go to any of the connection pages, your custom connectors will show up in that same place. So by hitting the little plus sign, this is going to prompt me to log in and create a connection. Depending on the authentication type that you've chosen, it might automatically add. So in this case, for example, it was an OAuth flow. So since I logged into GitHub in my browser, it went quickly. Sometimes it might prompt me for username and password. So I'm going to create a blank app with a phone layout. And what I'm going to do once I have this app is I'm going to really quickly add a gallery and add the data source and then tie those things together. So by clicking add a data source, the demo that I select, GitHub demo that we just created, 3 minutes ago, adding that data source. Now I'm going to add a new screen that includes a list. So just showing you how easy it can be to build up a Power App as well. It's a sample gallery that is including sample text. And instead, I'm going to tie it to that data source and that operation that I just created. So I start typing GitHub, and you can see it pulls out GitHub demo. And the .list issues is the actual operation that I want to use. As I mentioned, there's 2 parameters, so I'm going to specify the owner and the repository. And again, depending on your service, these parameters might vary. And then by closing this function and hitting enter, it's actually going to go out and make that same request that I created 10 minutes ago back in Postman and actually load it into my Power App. And so I'm going to change quickly. So instead of, for example, instead of having the title being the assignee, I'm going to choose the title of the bug. And I'm just going to delete that image. And then I deleted my whole gallery. But just with that, you can see how easy it was to actually bring in the content from that custom connector that I created all the way into an app. And I can keep building it up and doing many more capabilities. But you can see how within a few minutes, I can build a connector that ultimately shows up amongst all of the other custom connectors all of the other connectors, including public connectors that we have within Flow and Power Apps. And then as an author, I can go and actually download that definition and submit it to Microsoft for certification. So I will flip all the way over to the end and just show you a set of slides for next steps. The Azure site is the one I first showed about all the ways to integrate into our platform. The Power Apps blog is where you can find more information specifically about building a connector. And in general, aka.ms/API connectors will point you to the latest and greatest information on building that connector. So with that, I will stop sharing. And if there's any questions, I'll answer them. Otherwise, I believe I'm handing it over to Nima.
I do have a quick question for myself. So I am looking under the custom connectors, which is very, very cool. And I see all my custom APIs that I wrote before.
Mm-hmm.
So it looks like you've gone out and done a big advancement or enhancement on APIs. Is there anything else that we need to look for?
My experience has greatly improved around development and testing. We're adding more capabilities to make it even easier for validation and all those great things to make the development experience much more streamlined. And then we've also done a set of improvements around submitting that, so you can, if you built a great custom API or custom connector for your service, you want to make it available to all your users. Now you can come to us for certification and we can release it publicly as well.
Cool. Really increasing the people that can get a hold of it.
Exactly.
That's awesome. So what we're going to do is we're now going to mute Tessa, which is going to lose me. And Nima, they're not going to be able to.
Hey guys, I'm not really sure if you can hear me because I can't hear anybody else, but I'll start from here. So my name is Nima, and I'm very excited to cover some of the announcements that we did for CDS and Build. Before that, though, I would like to try and cover some information about CDS for those of you who are not familiar with CDS. And with that, I'll start here. So with CDS, the value proposition is really that the focal point of your data is becomes CDS. So for those of you who want to integrate a lot of data from different sources, you can use CDS as the focal point. Then this enables you to build great apps on top of CDS. And it also enables a lot of other scenarios, like, for example, a lot of default Microsoft apps like PowerApps, Power BI to just work on top of that data. And as the ecosystem grows, you get even more apps working with this. So what makes you choose CDS? Let's go through a scenario where you have a standalone app that's connecting to other apps and services. And you can very much build connectors for that app against Flow, Power BI, PowerApps, and other apps in the Microsoft ecosystem. And that works fine. However, if your app really requires data to be synced across many sources, you can use CDS as the center of your data world, per se. And what that enables is when you build your app and you connect it to CDS, either sync or as your actual data source for your app, then you don't really have to do any more to connect all these apps to CDS. When you choose CDS, then there's a few ways to build apps on top of it. The very first way, Manas showed a little bit about, basically you start with your entities and you build a Power App through a wizard, and it's a very low-code and efficient way of doing this. It's very good for users like business users who don't really have any coding experience. However, if you do want your app to be fairly complex, have complex business logic, and you want to use source code, then you can use what's called the CDS SDK. And to use this, it's worth mentioning that all of CDS, very much like all the other services from Microsoft, has a hard dependency on Azure AD. A lot of the authentication work that you would have to normally do with other systems, it's taken care of by Azure AD. If you support single sign-on with Azure AD, you basically are covered, and the authorization part of it in CDS is covered by a lot of features that CDS has around offering roles, permission sets, and role level security. Which again, end-to-end, that makes up the story for security with CDS. So we tried to think about all the different scenarios where people build apps against CDS, and we came up with these four, starting with the PowerApps one. Again, Manas kind of covered this. You can just start with the entities and build your PowerApps. It just works. Then you might want to add a little bit of salt, a little bit of more complex operations on top of the PowerApps. And for this, we prescribe using Azure Functions to write your custom logic, custom business logic, and exposing it as a custom API to PowerApps. Kind of similar to what Tessa showed a little earlier, but we'll go through this with a demo to show how this is done. And then the two other columns that you see here, the third and the fourth one, they're somewhat similar, where you build your backend with CDS SDK. You connect to the CDS functionality, and you expose that either through a rich client like a Xamarin app or through like a web UI. So first thing, I wanted to cover the announcement that we did on Build, which is the CDS SDK is open as under preview. And this enables a lot of the most common cases where CDS will be used for, which is data access. This includes querying data, joins, and also operations like create, update, delete. The CDS SDK does support a lot of additional functionality like modeling, etc., and a lot more functionality that will come a little bit later. But as part of the preview, we try to focus on sort of the bread and butter scenarios that people are asking for. So with that, I'm going to move on to a demo. Using Visual Studio, you can build apps that talk to CDS SDK. Here we have a sample app that has the common data service package. So this is the CDS SDK package. It has references for common data service. And simple code of operations. So querying for product categories, then deleting and recreating a set of these entities. Then we are querying and updating some of these entities. And as you run this, before I run this, I'm going to turn on Fiddler to be able to capture what's happening on the wire. As I run this, you will notice that, again, the first thing you have to do is authenticate with Azure AD. And based on what we talked about around authorization and authentication, the data is accessed. The other thing you will notice is that I can very easily, just like any other .NET application, I can debug the entities that are shown as strongly typed and look inside them. And if I were to look at what's happening on the wire in this case, I will see a set of calls here that have to do with authenticating with AAD. So those are authentication steps. Then there's another step of discovery, which is contacting Azure to see where your specific runtime is located, the URI for that. And after that, all the other calls are based on that location for the different operations that we defined in our code. So the first one is made up of it's basically a query that has a from clause, a project clause, and a where clause. So it's taking category ID and name from product category and applying a filter, et cetera, et cetera. So this will correspond to the operations that we have from code. And I'm showing this really to show you that the SDK really is a shim on top of standard technologies and JSON. And if you really wanted to build your own version of the SDK, you could, but we've packaged up all the most useful, productive scenarios that you would want to use CDS for under the SDK for your convenience. So with that, I'm gonna check back again. I'm having some technical difficulties around being able to hear the rest of the folks. So I'm not sure 100%. I would appreciate some feedback, seeing if you guys can hear me or not. Okay, great. Sounds like people are
Hey, Nina, we're hearing it and everything looks great.
All right, fantastic. Thank you. Okay, so with that, let's resume where we left off. So the SDK in preview then can also be used with Azure Functions. This is another announcement that we made in build, which is a template that we introduced for Azure Functions that uses the CDS SDK. So I can show you the template first, but also we can go through a scenario where So here's the Azure function under experimental category. Here you can start creating your function and configuring your function. So for a scenario, for example, where I have an app already created, just like Manas showed. I've selected an entity product and I built an app. Works great. But let's say I wanted to enhance what's included as part of the product data with, let's say, product category details, names, etc. There's not that easy of a way to do this today in PowerApps, but again, our prescription is for you to use Azure Functions to do this. So here I have a Azure function that I created based on that template. In my code, I am taking products, I am joining it with product category, and projecting out a set of fields, taking those fields and returning them as an array of JSON objects. Assuming I wrote the code and I tested it and it works, next step is to take this and package it up as a custom API and use it in PowerApps. So Tessa showed a lot of the steps that I was going to go through to show this. So I'm going to skip those. It's basically a matter of taking this function and defining the Swagger for it, and then on the other side building the custom API or custom connector for it. So when I do that, then I'll be able to add that connector here. And I'll be able to add a gallery. I added 2 of them, so let's delete one. And again, similar to what Tessa showed, I can connect this up to function. And as that's running, I can also rewire some of these fields. The first one, I'm going to use the name of the product. Second one, I'm going to use the category name, which I got from the product category table or entity. And here I'm going to use the category image. So there you go. We have a fully functioning app with 2 entities. We can, again, make this more complex and add more entities or add more data sources, but you basically get the point. So let's get back to here. As part of this, there's some documentation that's out there today if you want to try it out. But again, to use the SDK, you would have to join the preview program, which I'll share some of the details about. And in planning for the second half of the year, we have making this process of creating this function and using it in PowerApps as simple as possible. So automating a few things like setting up authentication and some of these other steps. So with that, just wanted to share some announcements around the preview program. So if you are interested in using the SDK and getting more in-depth support and documentation on the SDK, feel free to join the preview app. The CDS preview program, and there is some existing basic documentation on the web, but to get more support, you need to join the program. And with that, I will leave it to Chuck.
Go ahead.
Okay, guys, I want to thank very much the dev team. I want to thank Tessa. I want to thank Jono. I want Sabin, Nima for calling in. Hopefully we actually can meet tomorrow, Nima. I was hoping to catch up with you. And Manas for kicking this off. I'm sorry about the first 7 minutes. What I'm going to go ahead and do is a nice thing about Google, unlike on 24, I can easily go out and actually truncate pieces out that were dead space. So those first 7 minutes, if you do go back and check the high-res vids, which Jerry said you're going to do, those will be gone by tomorrow. Otherwise, next week we've got James, who just snuck out, who's going to be doing deploying and ALM workflows for PowerApps. Getting back to exactly what Tessa was talking about, making it easier for you to actually go out and do the building and the deploying of these applications and making it enterprise scale. So again, next week, Thursday, we've got James Olnick doing PowerApps deployment. Otherwise, Charles Sterling thanking the dev team, and of course, you guys for joining us. And I need to go back to my machine to close off the broadcast.
Great. Thanks, everyone. Bye now.
Nice.